Okay, so we'll start. My name is Jeffrey Mullen. I'm a member of the Board of Appeals. I'll be acting as the chairperson for this hearing. With me are Kathleen O'Donnell and Theodore Daber, both board members. Today is July 25th, 2023. This is our 7 o'clock hearing upon the application of 552 Adams Street LLC, Louis T. Falcone Jr., dated May 24, 2023, on file with the board, seeking a renewal of an existing special permit originally granted on January 26, 2001, under the terms of Section 7C5 of the Milton zoning bylaw for the Starbucks Business Coffee Shop, which is located in a residential C and business district. A condition in the original special permit decision states that the special permit for the Starbucks business must be renewed every 5 years unless extended by the Board of Appeals after notice and hearing. All is set forth in the application and plans on file with the board and open to public inspection. I'd like to welcome everybody to the hearing. As I said, my name is Jeffrey Mullen. I'll be acting as chair with Kathleen O'Donnell and Mr. Daber. Let me, as is the board's custom, I want to address some preliminaries. I've got the application that was submitted by, is that you, Mr. Brennan?
Yes, sir.
Attorney Brennan, attorney for the applicant, is that correct?
I'm not an attorney. I'm a permit expediter, but I've been doing permits for Starbucks for a long time.
Okay, this is you, Daniel DB, that's Daniel Brennan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, so you represent
Starbucks, but I'm agent of the landlord because we have to file for the property owner.
Right, I see that. Okay, so let me just go through what's in the application so that the many people at home who are tuning in. So we've got the application on the board's form signed by Mr. Brennan. We've got a landlord approval package, which appears to be on Starbucks's form, which is indicating that the owner, Louis Falcone, authorizes the Starbucks permit agent, Mr. Brennan, to file for the applicable permits. And that's the reference to which Mr. Brennan referred. There are also several plans of the premises, the location of the restaurant, which I know the members of the board are familiar, site plans, etc., accompanying the application, which is on file with the board. We've also got a couple of letters from interested parties that I'd like to set in for the record, and then I want to just talk about procedure for a second. We've got an email from Mr. Paul Travers, building owner and resident of East Milton. It's short. I'd like to read it into the record. Dear Board of Appeals, upon the application of the renewal of the coffee shop license, I would like the board to address the following items: trash and parking. The town has a trash bucket in front filled almost all the time. I don't feel that it should be up to the town to empty it all the time, and it's mostly filled to the brim with Starbucks trash. Also, the parking should be looked at during the day because of the Uber takeout orders. Also, a good power wash of the patio every few days and some landscaping could go a long way. Also, Adams Street could be swept by the shop or landlord as it's done by the commercial occupants of the square. Yours truly, Paul Travers. We also have a letter from Mr. Burke, Mr. Dick Burke, who is on Pleasant Street. He's active in Milton planning activities. He's familiar to the board. His letter is somewhat longer. I'm going to read it anyway. It's only 2 letters, and both of them have important points to make, and both people took the time to let the board know. To whom it may concern, I'm writing with some thoughts and concerns relative to extending the variance for Starbucks at 552 Adams. Starbucks has emerged as a staple and popular coffee and food shop in East Milton due to its outdoor plaza, often used as a meeting place for customers. The issue I have had and continue to have is the trash that can be traced back to Starbucks. It should come to no one's surprise that Starbucks generates most of the trash in East Milton due to their menu and takeout option. Fairly recently, Starbucks has repositioned at the request of the health department and added a trash receptacle on the plaza, which is a step in the right direction, but does not totally solve the problem. Keep in mind that Starbucks is located in the heart of East Milton Square, positioned between 4 restaurants and other small businesses that rely on foot traffic for their businesses. As a result, people are judging our town and town government and the services it provides every day. Litter and trash do not relate positively to our image as a town or business district. The following is a list, not all inclusive of the parties involved. The landlord charges rents to Starbucks and pays taxes to Milton. In return for taxes, the landlord expects town services that customarily include street cleaning and emptying of trash receptacles. The landlord is responsible for the upkeep and cleaning of the outside areas. The tenant, Starbucks pays rent to the landlord, and the landlord is responsible for the actions and behavior of the tenant and provides certain services to the tenant. The town, Milton receives tax payments from the landlord and provides customary services in return. The customers, many, but not all residents of Milton that purchase, goods from Starbucks, and oftentimes, usually depending on the weather, use the patio. Residents, those residents that do not use Starbucks, benefit from tax revenue paid by the landlord. Looks like there might be a missing word. Now, here's where I am on this. I'm an occasional customer, but have stopped due to the oftentimes unsightly condition of the areas around the building, including patio. I want the trash situation around Starbucks dealt with before the variance extension is granted. I want to know who has responsibility and what is the responsibility for the landlord, Starbucks, and the town. Everyone should know and agree on their role and responsibility with oversight from appropriate town officials. This is not meant to be intrusive or overreaching, in my opinion, but rather an attempt to deal with a situation that needs to be dealt with, solved. Currently, we have one significant business district, and how it is maintained is a measure of the town. How we are viewed in many instances is how we are perceived, and this affects the viability of the commercial district and the attractiveness of Milton as a place to live. We have very limited commercial tax base, and every effort needs to be spent to maintain this area in a generally acceptable manner. This should benefit the town, businesses, patrons, and taxpayers, the ultimate win-win. Thank you for your interest and consideration. So those are the two pieces of information that board has received since the filing of the application that are now read into the record. I did contact the board's assistant, Julia, and asked that Mr. Atchu or another representative of the town be here, because I thought that the comments that were received really respond to and call for some input from the town on how we might address them. Mr. Brennan, you should expect that the board will inquire as to those issues during your presentation, so you can prepare yourself for that. And I assume that you've seen those, both of those comments. Okay, let me make one other comment, and that is I want to read into the record the file that we have so that we can all understand procedurally where we are. Starbucks and the owner of the property originally received the special permit in 2001 via a decision issued by the board. Hang on a second, let me get the date. Oh, okay. On January 26, 2001, that was the original decision. It's a 5-year permit. The decision was updated and reissued in 2012, 11 years later, June 13, 2012. And again, by a second amendment, effectively an amendment to the original permit in September of 2017. So that was slightly more than 5 years after the second, the first renewal of the permit. So that was September 25, 2017. Now, today is July 25th, 2023. So the permit's expired. This is the second time this has happened to Starbucks. The first time, I just want to make sure that I've got this right, and Mr. Brennan, you can correct me, but according to the board's records, we've got an original 2001 permit that lapsed and was reissued in 2012, all for 5 years, and then extended again for 5 more years in 2017. Here we are 6 years later on a permit that's also expired. So it's been twice now that's expired. Once it expired for several years. My point is twofold. The first, I'm going to ask you to make your presentation in a minute. I think the board and the town need to know need you to confirm that that's the accurate record so that we can confirm we've got accurate records. And secondly, I think I'm interested in taking steps to avoid this from happening again. I was part of that 2017 hearing. I remember the 2001 initial permit because that was a very big deal for the town. So we need to make sure that we're keeping in compliance with the special permit requirements, and we don't fall into a situation where we're consistently dealing with a lapsed permit. And indeed, the standard of review for that is as if there is no permit at all. So it's like going back to square one. So with all of that, Mr. Brennan, welcome to the Board of Appeals. How can we help you tonight?
Thank you, sir. Board members. Just to go to the expiration of the special permit, yes, you are correct in the sequence of events. We have made changes within our calendar to make sure that we're notified at least 3 months before the expiration. It's fairly rare. We have a lot of stores, all corporate run, and it's very rare to have special permits that expire. And I don't believe the town notifies us of this. We have a similar situation in Lexington where we've incorporated a calendar so that if there's turnover with employees and whatnot, there is still a notification within the company so that it does not lapse. So we will be doing better in the future and making sure that this special permit does not expire and we're not in the same situation. I was part of the 2017 renewal as well. I handled that. So that's just to give a little bit of background on that. Right now, we are planning to renovate the store, which prompted us to go through our records and realize that the special permit had expired. So that's why we're here today. In addition to needing to renew our special permit. And I do have the district manager on the line, Lorena Nunez, to help answer operational questions because we were made aware a couple days ago of the trash concerns by the 2 resident letters you read. So we are internally stepping up, monitoring the patio. It seems like that's probably the biggest concern, biggest proponent, I would say maybe, that if the patio, there's a Dunkin' Donuts across the street, maybe they don't have the same issues that we do, I don't know, but they don't have a patio. So we are stepping up our monitoring of this patio area and making sure that we check the trash bin in our patio area so that people aren't bringing their trash beyond our property line and making a mess throughout the city. I do have a brief presentation. If you want, I can share my screen just to kind of show you what we're doing.
Please, that'd be terrific. Thank you.
Sure. Let's see here. Got the wrong thing up here. All right. So this is just basically a general site plan, and I grabbed a picture off Google just to kind of show the exterior that we're talking about. This picture was taken this month. So here's our patio area. You can see we have patrons out there enjoying the patio, and off near our entrance, we do have a trash receptacle that we're going to monitor much more closely. I know there was also some concern about the trash along the street. That's the city's. There it is right there. And here's just our site plan. Nothing's changing to our site. Just the furniture is being switched out, and we're going to update the signage. So here's our existing drawing, the way that the store is now. The red is what's going to be removed and demolished, and the blue is what's being relocated. And then this is what our new floor plan is going to look like. Basically, new furniture outside. We are moving the coffee bar over along this wall. It's going to be a much cleaner, nicer look, nice banquette seating. There'll be 14 interior seats and 14 patio seats. Everything's going to be all new finishes. The equipment's going to look brand new. And here we have a basement area where there's some restrooms that aren't being touched, and an employee area that we're just switching out some shelving and a little kitchenette for the employees. This is the way it's going to look when it's redone. Just a break room, really. And here's some 3D images of what the interior of the store would look like. You can see here is the main entrance. Right over here, here's the main entrance, the patio area with the nice new coffee bar. Here's some other visuals of the banquette seating, all the new finishes throughout. And another view of our coffee bar where you can place your order. And then here's just some exterior elevations. We're not really doing anything to the outside other than removing the signage and putting up new signage. Instead of saying Starbucks coffee, it's just going to say Starbucks. And we're moving our interior logo emblem to the front facade. So that's the way that what we're planning for the store. I know that's not necessarily why we're here right now. We're here to renew our special permit and address any operational concerns. But I just wanted to share what we're planning. Is it okay if I stop sharing my screen, or do you guys want to take a further look into this?
Pleasure of the board. What's the pleasure of the board?
It's fine.
Keep it up or,
No, it's fine.
okay, you can take it down there, Daniel.
Can I ask a question while,
Mr. David.
Chair, while we're, while that's up there?
Yes, sir.
And I apologize if you said this. If you did, I missed it, but does this change the seating, the number of persons to be seated in the shop from what it currently is, your proposal?
Good question. I don't believe so.
I can chime in here. So during the pandemic, the number of seats that we are licensed for were definitely reduced. This will actually bring us back to where it was pre-pandemic. So we're not adding anything additional to, we're just going back to what would be considered to be normal.
And what is that number, please?
So
14 inside and 14 outside.
And that's what was originally permitted?
I believe so.
It's
Yeah.
probably in the original permit.
I'm looking at it.
See if I can-
I'll be looking into that when I do the review before we do the approval of the permit for the renovation.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, okay, yes, I was asking because I mean, with respect to the special permit, it might affect the parking too, so.
Yeah.
Mr. Dave, any other questions right now?
No, thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Brennan, you can put the screen down. Okay. Does that complete your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Nunez, do you have anything to add on behalf of Starbucks before we go to questions?
just to kind of address some of the concerns that were brought up, some of the things operationally that we are putting in place effective immediately. We are having the patio area power washed this week. We're also increasing the amount of labor that we are spending and the frequency in which we will be monitoring and cleaning up the parking lot as well as the front patio area.
I missed that. I heard you say frequency, but I didn't, the noun that you used, increasing the what?
The frequency in which we are monitoring and taking care of the parking lot and the front patio.
I see. To how often?
3 times per day. Minimum. It could increase from there depending on what we're looking at it all the time, but it is planned for 3 times a day. If it requires more attention than that, we will definitely take care of it.
Yeah. Okay, is there anything else?
No, sir.
All right, let me just do some housekeeping, and then I've got some questions, and I would ask the board and the building inspector, building commissioner to ask questions or to and then we'll deliberate. The 2017 special permit, which is the operative permit, which I consider a permit, not an amendment to an earlier permit because it had lapsed, indicates that there are 21 inside seats and 24 outside seats at the premises. So 14 and 14 is less than what you currently are permitted for. Well, I shouldn't say that because that permit is lapsed, but than what we were expecting, or what we had traditionally expected. You didn't really talk about the number of parking, or the availability of parking. At the time of 2017, there were 34 parking spaces in the parking lot, 13 of which were designated for Starbucks. I think that's really the genesis of Mr. Daber's question. So the board is interested in the permit is really all about availability of parking in the commercial district. So the question is how many parking spaces will be available for Starbucks customers?
That hasn't changed. It's still going to be 13.
Okay,
So
so 13
guess-
spaces, and there'll be 14 spaces inside to sit and 14 spaces outside.
Correct.
Okay. When you talk about the signage, is this standard Starbucks signage across your entire commercial footprint?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, it changes from here to there, but basically we're dropping the Starbucks coffee to a Starbucks because that's more of our branding at all of our stores now.
Part of your kit. It's part of your kit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, are you going to apply for and obtain a signage permit from the town?
Yeah, so we've applied for a renovation permit with the building department, and that's going to be separate from our sign permit. Our sign vendor will apply for a separate sign permit.
Okay.
With the city, with the town.
Do the renovations include the addition of any landscaping at the premises?
No.
Okay, so that was a concern that was raised by the abutter. So that's something that I'm interested in whether or not you're planning or could plan improvements to the landscaping consistent with what you might see at another premises or something to beautify the area. Question on the table. You're talking about an hour, talk about later, whatever you want.
I mean, the only thing I can add to that is that the landscaping per our lease actually falls under the landlord responsibility. I took over the market shortly over a year ago at this point, and I did put in a request for Falcone to take care of it back in October of 2022. That has not been addressed, and multiple inquiries have been put. I will do what I need to do. Obviously, we want to operate the store, we want to be there for the community. But it is a battle that we are kind of having right now with the landlord.
No, well, we're not going to have a battle because we're not going to get in the middle of that, right? So it's from our perspective, it's the owner and the applicant coming in front of the board for the special permit. So suffice to say that a comment has been made about the inadequacy of the landscaping. It's a pretty prominent location in our only business district. So I'll let the board speak to that too, but that's just a question. On the additional trash, I understand there's two kinds of trash, and the town has responsibility for the trash receptacles that are on Adam Street itself. Now, you indicated during your testimony that you're going to be making additional efforts to take care of the trash. Does that mean more trash receptacles, more times per day that the trash is going to be taken care of? And what specific steps can you represent to the town are being taken so that you'll relieve the burden on the town's trash facilities on Adams?
So I will say that the number of trash receptacles will remain the same. We have one in the back door near the parking lot that we take care of. We also have one in the front of the store in the patio area that we also take care of. And we have several receptacles inside of the store so that customers can also dispose of the trash before they leave our four walls. So the number of trash we have will remain the same, the receptacles. The frequency in which we are monitoring and changing them out is increasing.
And what is that?
3 times, a minimum 3 times per day, but as needed.
So it'd be minimum 3 times per day as needed with the goal. Is it fair to say that the goal of that is so that Starbucks is taking care of its own trash, without undue reliance on the town's facilities on Adams Street. Is that a fair statement?
I would say that that is a fair statement.
Okay. On the power wash, you said that you are power washing the premises. Now, have you committed to, or will you commit to a frequency of power washing?
We will commit to making sure that it remains appropriate at all times.
Weekly?
I cannot make a commitment to power washing weekly. It is very loud and very costly, and not always the solution.
Okay. Let me ask the board if Ms. O'Donnell, if she has any questions of the applicant at this time.
Well, I appreciate, Mr. Mullen, the opportunity, because I actually was thinking about the landscaping and wondering who had the responsibility for that, and I assumed, and Ms. Nunez answered that that's the landlord's responsibility. So that might be something that we should discuss in our deliberations, some way to enforce some mechanism for that. I also would recognize, as I live in the neighborhood, that Starbucks is not the only trash generator in the neighborhood. There's, as Mr. Daber pointed out, there's a Dunkin' Donuts across the street. There's a new Pliables, there's the pizza places, there's, lots of sort of fast food opportunities now in that street. So it would be helpful to make sure that Starbucks was carrying its weight for their stuff. But we recognize that you're not the only, you're not the only player in that role. As I can tell from my walk up and down the street all the time. I know it's not just you guys. But I know that, that's been a concern, and I think that's sort of asking a question back to the building commissioner about how often does the town come through and rent and empty its trash receptacles? I don't think anybody knows, and maybe Mr. Atchu could answer that question.
Yeah, actually, I don't know. It'd be more of a question for the DPW and what their transportation that they do with their waste management.
Thank you.
In no official manner, but we have been monitoring that because it is the city receptacle that gets overflown very frequently.
Yep.
And it is serviced twice a week from what we understand or what we see happening throughout the week.
Thank you.
Mr.
No
Davis.
other questions.
Thank you.
I mean, there was a reference into Mr. Travers's email about looking at the effect, I guess, of Uber takeout orders on the parking situation. I'm not sure exactly how that would be done, and I'm not sure exactly what the issue is with it. So I'm not sure exactly what the right question is to ask. Did either of you or Mr. Atchu, has that come up in any other? Well, you're fairly new, so it wouldn't have come up in any of the matters you've been with. But I could see where it could possibly be an issue with cars either waiting or double parking or maybe blocking in other vehicles. I guess, is that any issue that we can deal with on this parking issue? Since you raised it?
I think the only thing that you could raise if there's a lot of, illegal parking or double parking and issues like that would have to be more of a police enforcement and doing that sort of thing where they go around and ticket people and whatnot for parking illegally and blocking in other or using spots in spaces that they're not allowed to be in. As far as from the building department standpoint, we don't have anything that we can enforce there. The only thing that we can enforce is that they have enough parking spaces for the use of the establishment as it is, so that they can service patrons within. but the frequency of people coming and going and using the establishment as a takeout without a drive-through, we really can't monitor that or enforce that to any capacity.
Let me ask the applicant if they're proposing to do anything to improve the situation with the takeout and pickup in the parking lot.
So I actually have the store manager, Greg Popolo. He's also joined the call today, and he actually said he would like to speak about the parking. I don't know if we can make him part of the panel.
I just promoted him over.
Thank you. Greg?
I'm sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so I do.
Why don't you,
appreciate-
before you start, why don't you tell us who you are and who you work for and what you do and your role here.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Greg Popple. I'm the store manager of the Milton Starbucks. I've been currently enrolled at this store for a little over a year. As the town knows, as a lot of you know, we went through some rough times, a very big transformation, and the community has started to embrace us back, which is great because I've gotten to know a lot of the people in the community. So as far as the parking, I can understand the concern about the Uber Eats, but the Uber Eats isn't the issue. The issue is that there's no commercial parking for the other establishments on that Adams Street strip. And if you look, my parking is supposed to be private parking just for tenants in that establishment, but I have Novara, I have Abbey Park, I even have Dunkin' Donuts customers, I have Pliables. I've even had to come to the point where like my partners actually have to park at the marketplace down over by CVS because there's no parking. And the landlord has come back to us and said that, well, the town is saying that we need to make this parking lot public to everybody, but at night. At night's not the issue. I don't have a heavy foot traffic at night. I have my heavy foot traffic during the day, and nothing is being done during the day. And it is a little frustrating because my partners are telling me that they have to park, half a mile down the street at CVS because they have no parking. So I can understand how customers are frustrated. So my thing is the landlord isn't upholding his end of the lease. Like I feel as though with Starbucks, we took this on like we're doing the best, we're making changes, we're getting better. And the parking, unfortunately, like I can't do anything about it because my partners even struggle with the parking.
Thank you, Greg. And just to answer your original question, the parking lot is not part of our responsibility, our scope of responsibility. That actually falls under the landlord as well.
Okay, so the problem with this whole line of thinking from my perspective and testimony is that from the board's perspective and the town's perspective, I don't really care if it's the landlord or the applicant. The issue is whether or not the commercial premises has enough parking to support the activity. The testimony we have, I think, leads you to say that you certainly don't see a parking plan. I mean, and even though you've got fewer spaces, it feels like the parking has been exacerbated, certainly since the initial permit was issued, and maybe since 2017, I don't know. So we may need Mr. Falcone to come here and give us a little parking plan of how this parking is going to be used. I was going to suggest that the parking lot be specifically signed for takeout and offer some spaces dedicated for this, because that came up. We only got 2 letters. Both letters said that this is an issue. And Ms. O'Donnell knows better than Mr. Daber and I. She's there every day, but we've spent enough time in the square to know that there are multiple parking problems, and there have been since we began since the proliferation of restaurants began about 20 years ago, for which I think the town is overall pretty grateful. And I don't know if the building inspector has something he'd like to add to this, but I really feel like that's pretty much at the heart of this hearing.
Yeah, I mean, when you stop and look at it, and it's coming into our review for the renovations that they want to do too, is looking at the occupant load and how they service the customers. And parking is a big part of that. Making sure that you have so many handicap parking spots and, you know, number of parking spots to service the patrons that are going to be using the facility. All those come into play when we're doing renovation looking at issuing permits for stuff like that. And that all comes into, you know, if they had an occupant load back in 2017 that allowed them to have 21 people inside, now they want to do 14. Well, now maybe they're going down an occupant load and it takes a new occupancy certificate to allow a certain occupant load for work and actually be in the establishment at this point in time. Those are things that I need to look at.
Yeah, I might tend to agree with that, but based on the testimony we've heard, we're sharing this parking. It's not exclusive to Starbucks. It's simply available. That's what I'm hearing. As I recall from 2017, there were 34 spaces in the parking lot, a specific number of which were dedicated for Starbucks. It doesn't sound like that's the case any longer. And it feels like from the testimony that the landlord isn't living up to his end of the bargain. I don't know whether that's true or not, but from the board's perspective, I don't think it matters. I think we need to understand what the parking plan is and who's using what. What's Novara using? What's Dunkin' Donuts using, if anything? And perhaps that falls to Mr. Falcone, but I do feel like the application needs to be supplemented on this critical point. But, you know, obviously, I'd invite comments from the commissioner or from members of the board on this point.
Well, Mr. Mullen, I would say that as a former member of the planning board, the issue of
We
parking
remember.
in this area has been something that's been discussed, you know, throughout town for ages.
Yeah.
You know, it's just ridiculous. And in my experience, sort of walking around, the sort of the Uber Eats and those people are not using parking spaces. They are double parking on Adams Street and running into the Chinese restaurant, running into Starbucks, running into Navarre, running into all kinds of places. They're not using a parking space for the most part. And so every time on the rare occasions when I have been with somebody and we've gone to Starbucks and wanted a parking space, we've always gotten one during the day. So I think that the stress on the comments about the Uber Eats and the double parking and all that sort of stuff is true for the entire area. I don't think it's really targeted to so much to Starbucks. I think it's actually happens more with the sort of Chinese restaurant down the street. There's constantly coming in and out with bags of stuff. So I think the idea of getting some sort of commitment from Falcone is a good one, to sort of say that he's doing what he's supposed to be doing to maintain those spaces for Starbucks and not generally making them available to the public. But that's the parking in East Milton is an ongoing struggle.
Yeah, fair point. Good point. Mr. Daber?
I don't think I have anything further to ask or add about that. I also think it's a good suggestion to get some kind of clarification and confirmation and from the owner.
Fair enough. Mr. Atchu, do you have anything you'd like to add? No? Oh, okay. I can't see you. Did you say no?
He's
You're
muted.
muted.
Muted, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so my main point would be the fact that whatever their occupant load is that they're utilizing the building for, they need to have enough parking spaces to take care of that occupant load based on design flow and handicap accessibility. That's one thing that I'm going to look for when they do it. So they just have to maintain that they can service the amount of people and have parking spaces for them people. If they don't, it's going to change the outcome of their occupant load that they can have for the building.
Yeah. All right. Let me make this suggestion. Let me ask this. If my sense just so people, it may be obvious of where I'm going with this. I'd like to propose that we continue this hearing without prejudice to the applicant. And the reason I'd like to continue it is I'd like to get some information either from Mr. Brennan as the applicants, as the owner's proxy. He's got the owner's authorization, so we don't need to see Mr. Falcone, but we do need a representation from Mr. Falcone as to what's going on in that parking lot. I can tell you in 2017, this was the subject of that hearing. And the decision of the board, I'll read it. The applicant had successfully operated there for 16 years. Good fact. The store had 21 inside seats and 24 outside seats. There were 34 parking spaces, 13 of which were designated for use by Starbucks customers. To the building manager, the Starbucks manager's testimony, I really think we need a parking plan. What's going on here in this building, and how much of this parking is being made available for Starbucks customers, including handicap accessible spaces. Now, I feel like there's not a lot we can do about policing Adams Street or Franklin Street or Bassett Street, Mechanic Street, or any of the streets around there. To Ms. O'Donnell's point, at least the board can't do. We can certainly raise awareness of it, and Mr. Atchu can speak to the Milton Police Department about raising awareness. But there are things we can control, and I feel like we don't have a good handle on what the parking plan is. I'd also like to hear whether or not it's possible to improve the landscaping. So that was an issue that was raised. The testimony was that was the landlord's responsibility. That's fine, but it does seem like the property needs a little bit of sprucing up, particularly given the level of investment, for which I think the town is overall grateful. I think in balance, it's a good amenity. So I'm not saying that the town, that we're not trying to make this work, but I just think we lack core information upon which permits us to make the finding necessary to give you the 5-year special permit you seek. Let me ask.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Before you do that, Mr. Brennan, let me, there's an issue on the table. Let me hear whether, and let's just complete the thought on behalf of the board, whether or not the board members have anything that they'd like to add to that thought, to which Mr. Brennan can then respond.
I don't, Mr. Chair.
No, I agree, Mr. Chair, that the two things that are the issue is the landscaping and the parking, and both of those are on the board, on the responsibility onus of the landlord. And unless, I mean, I suppose we could draft a decision that says that the landlord shall do this, shall do that. But it probably makes more sense to find out, make sure that we're sort of supporting Miss Nunez's request to the landlord to sort of say, you're going to have to do this as part of the permit, and making sure that he's agreed to do so.
Yeah.
And the trash is, the trash is an issue too. It's.
Well, what we're hearing on the trash is that we've got a
Right.
three time per day program, or
Right.
as needed, which I also think is going to really apply to the power washing. One issue we didn't talk about is sweeping the street or sweeping the sidewalk in front of the commercial premises. We haven't gotten to that. I can't imagine that Starbucks would object to sweeping the street sweeping the sidewalk in front of the commercial establishment on a daily basis, unless you do.
We already do that now when the
Yeah.
public trash is overflowing. Obviously, we don't change the trash because it's not our property, but we do
Right.
clean around it. We will
Right.
include that as part of our scope 3 times a day as
Yeah.
well.
You should expect that the board is going to have some response to each of the issues that have been raised by the neighbors. That feels like a reasonable thing to do. I know Starbucks National Company, and it doesn't seem like that's a big deal. But Mr. Brennan, you asked to be recognized.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
It seemed to me through the letters that more of the concern was on trash, and there was some question on the parking. We are reducing our seat count a decent amount from what we're allowed, and we're not changing what we are using for parking. 13 parking spaces back there. When we came before the board in 2017, there were also some other concerns raised about the parking lot, of which headlights being shined into the adjacent resident's house. And we did actually build a fence around the whole parking lot. So Starbucks is always working to be a better neighbor. And I feel like as far as the parking concerns, we are making it better with reducing our allowed seat count with this proposal. And maybe more restaurants or tenants are using our parking lot and it's not authorized. I'm thinking that maybe if we had signs that say for Starbucks parking only, that might help. Doubt it. People could probably still just park there and it's not going to necessarily get enforced. But I feel like it's a private parking lot and we're allotted 13 parking spaces. And we probably don't even need all those parking spaces now that we're reducing our seat count so much. And then as far as landscaping, I don't know if there's like specifics on what you guys would be looking for on the landscape. I mean, if I could share my screen, I could show you what it looks like right now, and maybe you guys could.
No, we know what, we're not landscapers. We're not gonna propose landscape. We're asking you to propose landscaping, so don't share your screen. You're, I'm sorry, Greg, I don't know your last name.
Yes, it's Popolo.
Popolo, you asked to be heard.
Greg, could you spell that, please, so we have it on the,
Yeah, it's PUO POLO.
okay,
And
great.
would you guys like my cell phone number for like a direct contact? Like if you guys have any issues like going
We're an
forward?
adjudicatory board. We only meet in public session. We don't,
Okay,
that you could talk to the town officials for that, but Mr. Atchu might want it, or he might, but. the
I
board's
have
not
no,
gonna-
I want to make myself available to you guys, like, you know, like, I'm not from the area, but like, I do love the community. I've been there for a year and, like, I want to do what's right for everybody.
Yeah,
Like,
we
I want to
appreciate
do what's
that.
right for everybody. And like, I have, built a lot of relationships within the town, like, within this community. Like I just want to do what's right for everybody, for all parties included.
Fair enough, fair enough. Mr. Brennan, let me respond to the point you made. I tend to agree that the parking should be better. The testimony we've heard is it's not working. The plan from 2017 just doesn't work. And it doesn't seem like you've got 13 dedicated spaces, which is why I was heading in the direction of signage. But we're not going to unilaterally implement signage and hurt the owner without a real plan. There is no parking plan that was part of this application. So that's what we're seeking. And to the extent that Uber Eats is part of that, that's fine, but we're not going to design that for you. I think you need a parking plan that's consistent with the use of the premises that the board can reasonably say is adequate. In the totality of the circumstances, we understand that there is a parking problem, a parking issue in East Milton Square. But the testimony today is that this is, the parking is not working for Starbucks. And if it's not working for Starbucks, it can't work for the board when we're reconsidering the terms of the special permit. That's what it seems to me.
I mean, we haven't changed our parking since 2001.
Somebody else has changed it for you because the testimony that your team gave us said it's not working and other people are parking in your spaces. That's what I heard.
If I could chime in. So this is actually a concern that I have also spoken to Mr. Falcone about. There is a sign on the premises in the parking lot that says unauthorized vehicles will be towed at owner's expense. Has graffiti on it. It doesn't look good. I've asked for it to be replaced and also for it to be enforced, both of which Mr. Falcone has failed to do.
Yeah. I guess that's part of my point. We all support increased parking enforcement in the private parking lot. And to the extent that somebody's questioning whether we've got regulatory authority to do it, I'd say we do, because we're being asked to extend a lapsed special permit for a commercial enterprise that requires some level of parking that we reasonably can believe will service the premises. So that's the issue you have. And I think that's the overwhelming weight of the testimony. Really, I agree, not from the testimony that we had pre-hearing, although the Uber issue was, but by the testimony about what we heard today. So I'll just reiterate, the board, my sense is the board would like to continue this hearing, and we'll ask Julia if she could find a date. At that hearing, we'd like to know what Mr. Falcone's plans are for the use of the parking lot, the availability of the use of the parking lot by Starbucks particular, but we should probably get testimony as to who else is using it. Whether or not there's an ability to address the takeout, and whether or not there's a landscaping plan. I'm not going to go so far as to say that we're requiring a landscaping plan, but we have had testimony about it. I personally would like to see the property improved, and we'll see what Mr. Falcone can do given the overall improvements to the premises. So that's the sense of the board. Applicant, would you be willing to extend this hearing, or do you want us to decide the application right now?
I guess it sounds like we should continue it.
Okay. Julia, is there a date that you could give us?
Yeah. Do you think like 2 weeks would be a long enough time? We could do Tuesday, August 8th at 7.
Some of it's back to the applicant and what you think. I mean, to me, these aren't complicated things. You talked about them. I'm sure Mr. Falcone is known to us all. He knows the premises better than all of us. Your own Mr. Popolo has some ideas. When do you think you'd be ready to come back?
I think we could do the 8th. I do want to talk with the landlord and make sure that we can align on that. But if we can pencil in the 8th, I think that would be good. Sooner the better. That's pretty soon.
Board?
I'm available.
Just checking.
Now, I'm not fully understand the whole area, but does Dunkin' Donuts have any parking?
Yes.
Yes, they do.
Okay. I was just curious.
Probably 6 or 7 spaces in the back. Maybe only 4 or 5, maybe 5. They have parking, and then, yeah, the insurance company does, and so does Santander Bank across the street.
Gotcha. My sense is that our parking lot has to work with what we have, because we have 34 parking spaces. And I believe it's just a bank and then a couple offices. It's more unauthorized people using our lot. So we'd have to enforce that somehow with signage and then actually towing people, I guess.
I think we're gonna need to see signage in the plan. I don't understand why there's not signage now. So I think that was, that's certainly the permit that you currently have, 34 spaces, 13 dedicated to Starbucks. So you kind of got to start there.
Yeah.
And then you tell us what the plan is, combination of accommodating the people who are lawfully authorized to park in the commercial lot and the people who aren't. And then we'll go from there. Mr.
Okay.
Popolo.
Just so we're clear, there actually is signage up. There
Okay.
is signage that it is a private parking lot. There isn't, there's only spots dedicated for Falcone and the business people above. Just so, just so, like, I want to be transparent, because it seems like these permits, like, things have not gone the right way or have been extended. Like I want to be transparent. There is a sign up. The thing is, on the lease, Falcone is responsible for it, but Falcone isn't enforcing it.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, we'll hear all that. Is the 8th, is Ms. O'Donnell's the 8th work for you?
Yes, it does.
7 o'clock.
Yes.
Applicant, does that work for the applicant? Mr. Atchu, does that work for you?
Yep, that's fine. It works for me.
Okay. So we're gonna, the board's going to continue this hearing until Tuesday, August 8th at 7 o'clock. Julia, could you send out invitations to
Yes. I'll
people?
do that.
7 o'clock, at which time we'll reconvene and hear testimony from either Mr. Brennan on behalf of Mr. Falcone or Mr. Falcone directly about the parking plan and the landscaping plan, and we'll further our deliberations on the application for the renewal of a 5-year special permit for the use of 552 Adams Street by a commercial coffee shop known as Starbucks. Fair enough?
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.